MBA 14, and I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations here at the college. On behalf of our office, I would like to welcome you to today's virtual Aluminar series, Toll House Kitchen to the State House Chamber, A Cookie and Me, a discussion with Kathleen Teahan, class of 69. Before we begin, there are a few important housekeeping items that I'd like to address in order to make this a great Zoom experience for everyone involved. First and foremost, I must mention that this presentation will be recorded for future use. In the top right corner of your screen, you will see two viewing options, full screen and speaker view. May we please suggest the speaker view for optimal viewing? Throughout the presentation, please keep your own screen muted and with the video off at all times as not to distract from our presentation. Q&A will take place immediately following the talk. Please feel free to type in questions at any time during the presentation using the chat feature in the middle of your bottom toolbar. Questions will be collected and answered at the end. We thank you for your attention to these guidelines, and it is with great pleasure that I'd like to introduce you to our guest host, Robert Bradley. Rob Bradley is head of bridge research at State Street Associates, a team that bridges the gap between empirical finance research and practice. He is the co-chair of the Bridgewater State University Employee Network at State Street and is on the board of State Street's Numerates Network. He is also a part-time faculty member at Boston College and Northeastern University. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Bridgewater State University, class of 2012, where he also majored in English. He has a master's degree in applied economics from Northeastern University, class of 14, and is a PhD candidate in applied economics at Northeastern, class of 2020. Rob lives in Bridgewater with his wife and his 3 sons. Please take it away, Rob.
Thank you, Alexis, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to those of you who have been to an Aluminar before. I see a lot of familiar names, and welcome to anybody who's this is their first Aluminar. You're in for a treat, pun intended for sure here. Really exciting presentation today. I'm excited for all of you to hear it. But before we begin, we're going to start a little bit differently today. I am launching a poll through Zoom right now. And we're going to ask everybody, have you ever made Ruth Wakefield's original Toll House cookie recipe? So it should have popped up on your Zoom, and then you should just answer yes or no. We'll see if we can get everybody or close to everybody to answer. It looks like a lot of people have. So far, let's see, we're missing a few votes. Almost everybody. So it looks like 80% of people have made the recipe before. I have not. I've made homemade cookies. I don't think I've used the original recipe, but as soon as I saw this question, I knew what I was going to be doing with my kids this weekend. So I will move into the yes column after this weekend. All right, great. I'm going to end the poll. And so, like I said, 80% of people have actually made this recipe. So you should be able to see the results pop up. So without further ado, while earning her English degree at BSU, one of Kathleen Teahan's part-time jobs was as a salad girl in the kitchen of the Toll House restaurant in Whitman. In 1997, her first year in the legislature, a 3rd grade class from Somerset asked then Representative Teahan to help them make the Toll House chocolate chip cookie, the official Massachusetts cookie. In this Aluminar, Teahan will share research, adventures, and challenges that she's enjoyed as she developed a passion for politics in a book about Ruth Wakefield's famous cookie. Kathy Teahan, class of 69, was married to the late Bob Teahan from 1971 to 1997. Bob was a BSU alumna and is in the Athletics Hall of Fame. She's the mother of Ann Teahan Dunning, Jean, Bob, and John Teahan, and is blessed with 5 grandchildren. From 1947 until 2008, when she moved to Cape Cod, Teahan lived in Whitman, Massachusetts, the home of the Toll House restaurant. She graduated from Bridgewater State College in 1969. While working her way through college, one of her summer jobs was as a salad girl at the restaurant. While teaching in East Bridgewater at the Gordon Mitchell Middle School, Kathy's 8th grade students wrote picture books for 3rd grade partners. Reading has always been her pleasure, and she enjoys watching her grandchildren develop a love of reading, as well as creating stories for them. Teahan served in the Massachusetts legislature from 1997 to 2007. Social justice is a passion for her. She served on the Whitman School Committee for 6 years, and in the past has volunteered in classrooms, food programs, scholarship committees, and several outreach programs, including Habitat for Humanity. Throughout her years in the legislature, she worked for justice, quality education for all, improved health, especially oral health, and equal rights. She currently helps others seeking positions in public office and works with the Sisters of St. Joseph of Boston on social justice issues. In 2007, Kathy published a children's book, The Cookie Loved Round the World, that tells the history of the Toll House chocolate chip cookie. When Teahan moved to Harwichport in 2008, she started writing a memoir about her 10 years in the Massachusetts legislature. Concerned by the troubling political division in the systemic racism in the United States, Kathy finished her memoir in September 2020. Her goal is to leave a better world for her grandchildren and children throughout the world. And without further ado, Kathy, I'd like to turn it over to you for you to take over and tell us your story. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Rob and Alexis and the alumni organization at Bridgewater State University, my very special alma mater. So I'm happy to be here with everyone. And here we are on December 9th, 22 days left of this year, which has been quite challenging for all of us. We've had the pandemic and we've had political fiascos beyond our imaginations. We've also had to postpone celebrations like Halloween, Thanksgiving, and for Plymouth, we had to postpone the 400th anniversary celebration of the landing of the Pilgrims, which would have been a big tourist attraction and a great economic boom for Plymouth. But in this year, 2020, we did have a great celebration for the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in this country. And to celebrate that, we elected our very first woman to be vice president, Kamala Harris. And as I was doing some research about women's suffrage, I came across a quote by a Massachusetts US congressman in 1875. His name was George Frisbee, and his last name was, Hoare, George Frisbee Hoare. And he was at a meeting about women's suffrage, and his quote was that for church, state, and communities to function well and work good, there needs to be active participation in the influence of women. And I happen to agree with Congressman Hoare totally. And when I was campaigning, my 10 years of representing the people of the 7th Plymouth District, I had 5 different campaigns, actually 6, because I lost the first one. People would tell me that we needed more women in our government, both men and women told me that. And some statistic I'd like to share with you. When I was elected in 1997, I was only the second woman in my district to represent my 3 towns. And before me, Martha Ware, who became a judge, had been a representative. And if you look at all the representation going back to the beginning of the Massachusetts legislature, there have been a total of 213 women. So I'm one of those 213. After this year's election, there might be 3 or 4 more. But since the beginning, there have been over 20,000 men involved in the Massachusetts legislature as a combination of House and Senate members. So you can see we still have a long way to go to catch up. And I believe this coming year with the new members, 30% of the Massachusetts legislature will be women. But before I get into my political life in more detail, I'd like to go back to what got me into the kitchen of the Toll House restaurant. It was 1968, and I was working at the Foxborough Company as my summer job before I went into my senior year at Bridgewater. At the Foxborough Company the year before, I had worked just doing repairs, and it was easy work. This summer, I was on the assembly line, and we were soldering the little components onto the circuit boards. All the women I worked with were extremely experienced and very fast at this, and I'm slow at everything. I couldn't keep up with them, and there really wasn't any conversation the whole day. You just worked on this assembly line. So I had to leave. So I gave my notice, and I started looking for another job, and the Toll House was looking for a salad girl. So I applied, and I took the job as a salad girl in the kitchen of the Toll House restaurant in Whitman, which was there for many years, but now there's only the sign right near Wendy's restaurant and Walgreens at the intersection of Route 14 and Route 18. So Rob, if you could put on slide 7, that will show the Toll House restaurant where I started working in 1968. So 1968 was the last year that Ken and Ruth Wakefield owned the Toll House. So I really didn't have much interaction with them, but I was taught how to make the salads, which were a garden salad, a molded gelatin salad, and a lobster salad with particular details of arrangement and ingredients, and had to be done very carefully. So if we can go to slide 5, I can show you. This is a picture of my mother and her family. My mother's on the far left, and then her 3 sisters and her brother. Her 3 sisters all worked as waitresses in the Toll House. So I had learned a lot about the Toll House from them and their stories and friends and family, because hundreds of people from my area, probably within a 15-mile radius, worked at the Toll House. So a lot of people had stories about it and how particular the Wakefields were and what made this into such a great restaurant. So now if we could just go to slide 5. Okay, we just did 5, slide 6, which will show us this is what the restaurant looked like when Ken and Ruth Wakefield put all their life savings into buying this building with a mortgage, then into refurbishing it and supplying it. This was in the middle of the Great Depression in 1930. Their friends and family told them that they were crazy. Ruth had graduated from Framingham, which at the time was Framingham Normal School, and she had studied home economics and nutrition. She had been working as a nutritionist in the Brockton Hospital and doing displays for different companies using their appliances and cooking. And Ken had worked in a meat packing factory in Brockton, and he was in the business office. But they had a dream to open this beautiful restaurant, which it did become. And so they went forward and they opened it. But the first day they opened it, the first week, they had $20 left to buy food and take care of things. The very first day, a socialite from Whitman had her bridge club there. And in the only 7 tables that they had in the restaurant, they filled the whole restaurant. And there were 4 people working at the Toll House at the beginning. Ruth was the chef. They had 1 waitress. Ken was the businessman or the administrator, and he helped with everything. And then there was a man who did the kitchen, the cleanup, the dishes, things like that. So 7 tables, 4 employees, and $20. So when this woman and her group of other women left, they raved about how wonderful their meal was. They loved the whole place. And the woman said, please send me the bill. So now they had to go on for the rest of the week with $10 because they had spent that money to have things ready for the first day. Second day, nobody came. Third day, one elderly couple came and they were down to $10. Ken said, Ruth, we have to keep the $10. I can't run to a garage or the bank to get change. We have to have change to give people. So somehow they got through the first day, the first weeks. By Christmas, they had a dozen people working for them, and they had 24 tables. They kept growing little by little by little. So Ruth knew it was a depression, but she said she wanted a place where people could come, relax, forget about their worries, really be pampered. Service was extremely important. The waitresses had to memorize what people ordered. They couldn't write anything down. They were supposed to talk with the people, get friendly with them, take all the time in the world. Every table had a different floral arrangement on it, and tables had different china. We have some experts in food who tell us about the Toll House restaurant. And one of those was in 1935, Duncan Hines, who we see on cake mix and brownie boxes as a person in the foods. He published a book called Adventures in Good Eating Across the Highways and Byways of America. But he wasn't into food except for eating food during those years. He was a traveling salesman who traveled across America selling supplies for businesses like folders, paper clips, papers, whatever else they were using during those days. And he kept track of all the good restaurants that he experienced. And one year, his wife and he sent out a list of the 100 best restaurants in the United States in their Christmas card. People were so enthused with that and so happy that they asked for more. So Duncan Hines made it into a little booklet and he sold it for $1.25. And in that booklet, he said about the Toll House that of all the places, this was one particular favorite. Every year it grew more and more charming with its gardens and with its special rooms. And Duncan Hines and his wife visited the Toll House and had pictures taken by Stanley Bowman, who was the longtime photographer for the Brockton area and the Brockton Enterprise. And he visited the Wakefields at their home. I used a picture of the Duncan Hines and his wife in the garden room of the Toll House for one of the illustrations in my book, but without them, just the room itself. So it was interesting to do all this research and find out how famous. I didn't know that the Toll House was this famous. Then in 1937, that was the next big year for the Toll House. And that is pictured in my book. I don't know if we can get to that right now, but it's on page 21 of the book, if that's on the PowerPoint, if that can come up. But if not, it's no big deal. I'll try and show it to you afterwards. But Ruth invented the cookie, and there are different versions of how it actually happened, but the one that the Whitman Historical Society and the one that Ruth's daughter, Mary Jane, gave me was that because of the Depression, they ran out of walnuts, and Ruth saw a big chunk of semi-sweet chocolate on the counter. So she chipped off some little pieces of the chocolate and put it into her buttered dewdrop cookies. And when they came out, the smell was incredible and people tested them and it was 2 thumbs up. Everybody loved them. So 1937 was the birth date of the chocolate chip cookie at the Toll House. Another big day for the Toll House was in 1938 when Ernie Pyle, the famous World War II journalist, visited the Toll House. He stayed over and visited it a couple days, and then he wrote 3 syndicated articles, and that went to 400 different newspapers across the country. And what Pyle said was very interesting. He said that the Wakefields told him when they were first opening that when restaurant suppliers came, they gave Ruth and Ken suggestions for how they could make a lot of money. And one was not make your seating too comfortable. You know, the harder the chair, the faster people will want to leave. So not to have comfortable chairs. The other thing was to invest in large soup bowls so that you could fill their stomachs up with your soup and then reduce the size of the main course portions. So that would help you financially. They didn't take that advice at all. They made it very comfortable for people. And you could even ask for seconds at, I don't know exactly how many years, but for quite a while, you could get second helpings without having to pay any additional costs at the Toll House. So they didn't do that. And then at the end of Ernie Pyle's last column, he said, of all the dozens of reasons why they were so successful is that they never chiseled or cheated their customers. They always gave a quality meal. And those quality meals were 5 courses, and they were incredibly good, and they had their reputation forever. So I worked at that place and was happy that summer, but then I graduated and was even happier to be pursuing a teaching position. I had a call from the superintendent of Whitman-Hanson, my alma mater, and that was at the end of August, asking if I would come in for an interview about a job at Whitman-Hanson. During the interview, the superintendent told me that if I wanted a job teaching English, I would have to also be the cheerleading coach for the football team and the basketball team at Whitman-Hanson. Well, I had no experience whatsoever in athletics or cheerleading. And I told him that, and he said, well, you could just supervise to make sure that they are safe and that they, are following the rules for the school and everything on the buses and chaperone them. And the girls can teach each other the cheers. So that worked out, and I took the job. And so for $250 a year, I was a cheerleading coach for 4 years that I worked at Whitman-Hanson. But one of the side effects was that I came under the direction of the athletic director, who was Bob Teahan at the time. So I was considered a coach, just like the basketball coach and the baseball coaches. So when we had parties or different things, all the coaches would go to different events together. And Coach Teahan and I also ate lunch together at school, and he had been widowed 2 years before. And so the story, I don't go into details now, but if you read my memoir, you can find out more details about it. But we fell in love. We got married in 1971. And in 1973, he said, Kathy, what do you think about me running for the state representative seat in our district? And I was surprised, and I hadn't been involved in politics much before. And so we looked into it, and he really was interested. He had really reached the top of success in coaching football, teaching at the school. He had been written up in the Boston Globe for his wonderful athletic program. So he ran, and I helped him. And he worked for 2 terms, and that was before redistricting, but they redistricted at the end of his 2nd term, and he didn't want to run in a primary against another Democrat. He also really didn't like bothering people campaigning. He loved actually being in the legislature, but he didn't like the campaign part. So he left, and he, after 2 years, became a full-time scout for the Patriots. So if we fast forward to 1995, But up until then, I had been a stay-at-home mom for about 8 years, and I did all kinds of the volunteer work that Rob told. In 1995, Bob and I were in Whitman Center, and we were talking to Emmett Hayes, who was a former state rep. And Emmett said to Bob, you know, there's going to be an open seat for the representative of Whitman, and now the district was Abington, East Bridgewater. And it's a time for you to make a comeback. Well, out of my mouth came, if anybody in this family runs, it will be me. Not really thinking about it, not really meaning it. I just didn't want to go through all the campaigning. But they both looked at me and they said, would you really think of running? And Bob said, you know, you really like to help people, and being a representative, you get to make policies that can make a huge difference in people's lives. So let's think about it. So we went home, and this was, I think, in March. And I had to think about it, and I thought about it. It was extremely difficult. I was teaching at the time in East Bridgewater at the East Bridgewater Middle School. And I decided that, yes, I would try it. I had been on the school committee and I liked doing that. So we got a campaign together and we launched the campaign. There were, in the primary race, 3 Republican men, 3 Democratic men, and me. And it was a tough race all around, but I won the primary and had one opponent from Abington, a lawyer at the time. And we campaigned very hard. It was hard. It was really difficult going door to door. We raised the money and I lost the campaign and lost the election by 75 votes, which was very disappointing. But during the campaign, I felt as if things weren't done really on an even playing field. I didn't want to do anything negative because I was a teacher still at the time. I had been a Eucharistic minister at church. I was the CCD director at my church for 4 years, and I didn't like negative campaigning like most people don't. So my opponent had used some kind of canned things that they had received from Newt Gingrich's handbook for campaigning. So I ran against the same person who was just in for a little bit less than a year, a little more than a year. I ran against him and I beat him by 1,200 votes in the next election. And I did say some negative things, but I made sure that I cited where my information came from and had copies of things. So I won and I was very excited. Got to the State House, and the first day there, I couldn't figure out how to work the elevator because it just has a panel with a bronze plaque and 2 raised circles, but no words up or down or anything. So it was panic. So I just stood by the elevator and didn't know what to do till somebody else came along and pushed the button. Also, when we got to the State House, my first aide, Edna Donahue, who grew up in Bridgewater, her last name was Leganis, and her family owned Legan's drugstore. And so Edna was my aide, and we were put in a bullpen, which is what they called the room where everybody in my class was kept, with telephones and file cabinets and things, until the speaker decided where our office space would be and what committees we'd be on. So Edna was totally new to this, as I was. It took us a while to even find our way around the State House. And the first week, Edna ended up crying because the telephones were so complicated with the buttons for hold and conference and transfer and different things. But we got through it. And the speaker decided what committees you'd be on, and everybody sent the speaker two top choices. I had put healthcare and transportation. I didn't put education because I didn't want to make it seem like it was a conflict of interest because I was a teacher. So I chose those two. The speaker gave me healthcare, and he also gave me another committee, state administration. So we were still in the bullpen, and I got a call from Speaker Finneran's office inviting me to lunch at Lockober's, which was an extremely exclusive restaurant in Boston, which I had no idea anything about it, which only started letting women eat in the main floor. Women had to eat in the basement for quite a while, and it was just like maybe 10 years before I was elected that women could eat in the regular restaurant. So I told the speaker I had to decline because my first healthcare committee meeting was that same date, and I was sorry that I couldn't join him, but the other three colleagues who were going were class officers. I was the secretary, and then we had a president, a vice president, and a treasurer for our class of about 10 people who were elected in 1997. So I didn't get to do that. So you can see I was pretty new and was very dedicated, though I ate my lunch every day at my desk and really wanted to do a good job representing the 40,000 people in my district. So in healthcare, the issues at the time that were really big were the HMO, the Health Management Organization, insurance companies, which were putting everybody into a network where you had to get a referral to where you would have other appointments. The other big issues were prescription drug costs, safe staffing of nurses in hospitals, loads of other issues, but those were some of the big ones. So I was on that committee. The other committee I was on was state administration, which deals with state buildings, with state contracts, with state investments, and state symbols. So I was sitting in one of my state administration hearings. And at the end of the hearing, Senator Tom Norton from Fall River came in, and he came up to me and he said, Representative Teahan, I'd like you to join me in co-sponsoring a bill to make the Toll House chocolate chip cookie the original cookie of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I said, I'll get back to you because you don't want to make a decision right away. And so I had to think about it. And I talked to my husband about it. I was going to be working on a lot of issues. We were working on a big budget. And I'm a woman in my first term in the legislature. And I had a little note taped to my telephone that said, the press is your enemy, because the press can really twist things that you say or just use one sentence out of like a 20-minute interview. And it might be taken out of context and not really say what you meant it to say. So you had to be careful about your perception to your constituents. So I thought about it, but of course I had to sponsor it. I'm very proud of the Toll House, wanted to do things for my town, and the town could have used some recognition because we had lost all our industry, which was the shoe industry. And so I agreed. So we both sponsored the bill, and like we have other state symbols, such as the cranberry being our state fruit, we have our state dog, the Boston Terrier, the state cake, the Boston cream pie. So we set to work, and it finally was coming up for a hearing. So the reason why Senator Norton came up with this idea is he had visited a school in Somerset, Massachusetts, and the third graders just finished an interdisciplinary unit, which was incredible, all about cookies. And they had taken a poll to see what was the favorite cookie. And they had peanut butter, sugar cookies, oatmeal cookies, and chocolate chip cookies. Of course, chocolate chip won big time. They used their math to determine how much money they'd have to get in order to buy the ingredients, bake the cookies, then how much they'd have to sell the cookies for at school during lunchtime or after school to make a profit that they would give to the food pantry. They made up jingles. They wrote letters to the legislature why the chocolate chip cookie should be the official cookie of the Commonwealth. I mean, they really did a great job. So the day of the hearing, but it was the class coming in to testify. But before that, when the people of Newton found out that we were trying to do this, they were upset and they thought that the Fig Newton should be the cookie of the Commonwealth. So they asked their representative, Peter Katujian, who was also a new member of the legislature the year that I came in, and he was a good friend of mine. And so he had to be supporting the Fig Newton, and Governor Weld also decided to be in support of the Fig Newton because he was from Newton. Well, I have so much press coverage on that bill that I filled an entire scrapbook on it. When I was sending out things about our $24 billion budget to the press and about my amendments for oral health and different things, I wasn't getting very much coverage at all. So, but the cookie was very interesting, and it was a way to make fun of the legislature that we would be debating cookies. But Peter and I even got a call from the BBC and they said, we heard you're arguing about biscuits over there in America. And we got to be on PBS about it. I mean, it was incredible. But the day of the hearing, one third grade girl got up in front of the microphone and she said, how many people have ever come home from school and said, oh, Mom, you're baking Fig Newtons today? And that did it. It was unanimous in the hearing, plus the cookies that they brought into every single legislature helped. And so the cookie was voted in an informal session to become our official cookie. And so that happened. And I worked on a lot of issues when I was in the legislature, really, really important issues, such as end of life. I was on a subcommittee for that. I was on one for adoption and foster care. I was on a major special commission on oral health. I also worked on how to dispose of shops and hospital because of the AIDS epidemic that was still pretty much in the foreground. And I worked on the naturopathic bill so that naturopathic doctors could be licensed. So I worked on a lot of things, but I left the legislature in 2007. I just felt that with one aide, I wasn't getting to all that I wanted to because there were so many important issues to take care of and to work on. And also because the more you do in your district, the more people ask you to do. So we couldn't even get to some of the letters or the emails that we were getting with just one aide and myself after 10 years, but I loved every moment of it. And when I left, I still wanted to do something because I felt like I hadn't finished. So that's when I started writing my memoir. And I took a course at Cape Cod Community College and people liked what I was writing. So I went to an agent with my memoir and she read over a chapter and she said, you know, people really aren't into memoirs these days, but that part you have about the Toll House chocolate chip cookie is very interesting. She said, that might be something that you want to focus on. So I wrote the book about the Toll House chocolate chip cookie. And I am still finishing that memoir and I'm working with a wonderful editor and plan to have that out as soon as possible. We're going to edit it and then keep working on it in the new year so it can come out. But the Toll House Cookie Book is, I got the illustrator, and it's a 95% historical. And there's maybe like 5% that's fiction, because I did a lot of research and I had the experiences. So that's what I wrote about. One of the things I found out in my research is that in the United States, people eat 7 billion chocolate chip cookies a year. I also found out the largest chocolate chip cookie ever made weighed 40,000 pounds, and it's in the Guinness Book of World Records in 2013. And that's a really neat story if you ever want to Google it and find out about the Immaculate Bakery who did that. But in my book, I have these little squares called historical ingredients. And so I said, in this country of such wealth and all these cookies that we eat, and a story that has to do with the Great Depression and the struggles people went through, one of the historical ingredients I put in was about, in America, what the hunger was like. And in 2014, there were 5 million children who had experienced food insecurity in 2014. So there were 5 million. In 2020, which I read recently, there are 7 million children experiencing food insecurity. Another fact I found is that in 2019, there were 8 million adults living with food insecurity in the United States. And in 2020, there are 25 million adults living in food insecurity in the United States. So what I found out, and why I wanted to have this in my book, is because I feel that we live in a world and that we're all codependent on each other, and that we need to take care of each other. So when I do my book talks, I talk about world hunger as well as the cookie. But I also talk about Ruth Wakefield, who was an incredible woman with her dream. Starting out, she grew up in Massachusetts. She actually lived in Easton, Northeastern, and learned to cook from her grandmother. So I had Googled another thing about Ruth Wakefield. I put Ruth Wakefield and Julia Child into Google to see what would come out, because I figured they were both into food. What I got was a book called 365 People Who Changed the World. In that book are Michelangelo, Abraham Lincoln, Jonas Salk, Mother Teresa, and Ruth Wakefield. Well, you can imagine my shock when I saw that Ruth Wakefield's name was in there. But the more I learned about her, I saw that she made a huge difference. The governor at the time, it was Governor Saltonstall, had appointed her to a women's business commission for the state. She was on boards for hospitals. She had adopted 2 children and was on the board of the orphanage. She was very hard on her employees, but she also helped them whenever they needed help financially, if they had sick children. So she was an incredible woman. And through this cookie, she has brought incredible happiness to all of us. So she needed to be in that book, and I'm very proud of her. And I'm happy to sell my book. SDP Publishing in East Bridgewater sells it. I sell it myself. People can get in touch with me to buy it, because Amazon sells it, and I make $1.79 when Amazon sells it, and Amazon makes the rest of the $14.95 that they make. But other things that I talk about when I'm giving my book talks are the quality of the food that Ruth Wakefield used. And I found out that she always used King Arthur flour. And on King Arthur flour, there is a circle, which has a B in the middle, that only certain foods or products can get that certification. And it's like the Gandhi quote, be the change you want to be in the world. And Ben & Jerry's ice cream gets it, King Arthur flour, other companies that do fair trade and treat their employees well and use sustainable agricultural techniques do. So I don't have any idea if I have talked beyond my time or if we have time for questions, because my computer doesn't show. So do you think
You were so perfectly on time. I'm really surprised you don't have a clock in front of you. That's amazing.
No, I thought I would on the computer, but instead it says leave, so.
It says leave.
I was watching it perfectly. That was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I mean, just the number of places through history that you've touched throughout your life is really, really incredible. And what a story! The Toll House cookie has followed you from working to the State House to now writing books. So it's been a bit of a blessing for you.
It sure has.
Which is really nice, really nice. Excellent. So there's a couple of things. I mean, I was really interested to hear about like just the kind of approach the restaurant took, especially throughout the 1930s. So this is the Great Depression and just the amount of care and thoughtfulness that went into, how they took care of their customers, and especially at a time when people were telling them you need to get people in and out, which makes sense. I mean, from a business perspective, like turnover and keep things inexpensive, but taking a different approach. It reminds me, it connects back to, it seems like your service in the State House, honestly, which seems like you went for trying to make an impact in being really thoughtful and considerate of your constituents, which we should all be so lucky to have a representative that actually approaches their seat in the legislature that way. That's not always the case.
Well, we just have to get those people out there and get them voted in.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. So it's possible. We just gotta be well informed, I suppose. So just as a reminder, if anybody has any questions, you can submit them through the chat feature on Zoom, and I will relay them to Kathy. Can you give us the title of your book again so that people can find you and buy your book from you?
Yes, it's The Cookie Loved Round the World.
Oh, perfect. Jean actually gave us that as well. Thank you. Perfect. And I have to say, I've never seen so many people interacting in the chat while you're talking. So many people have memories of the Toll House restaurant, either going there or just knowing of it or living in the town surrounding it, and just how well known it was. One person, I'm going to try to find their name.
I know, it was so sad that we lost it. It would be nice if somebody would rebuild it and do something similar.
That would be really cool. Yeah, that would be really interesting. So somebody said that their neighbors were actually in the building when it burned down, or they had been there that day or something. So
it was New Year's Eve on 1984.
Oh, wow. Well, do they know what was the cause?
It was a grease fire in the kitchen that went up through the chimney to the attic storage room and everything. And the fire department got there, but there was nothing they could do. It was such an old building, I think, that the wood and everything went up fast. But the Toll House had lots of celebrities dine there, like Rocky Marciano, James Michael Curley, the Kennedys. As a matter of fact, Joe Kennedy, the father, and Rose stopped there a lot on their travels from between Boston and Cape Cod, and President Kennedy stopped there to buy cookies to bring down to the Cape when he was a senator. So we had lots of movie stars. The Roosevelts had eaten there. Roosevelt loved it.
That's really amazing. But obviously the name Toll House is so well known now. I honestly, before this, did not know there was a restaurant. So I didn't grow up in this area. I grew up on the Cape, but was unaware that there had been a restaurant until your talk was coming. So
Yeah, and
I missed
everybody,
that bit of history.
yeah, everybody knows the cookie, but nobody knows the story. So that's why I think it's very, very interesting to go back to that history.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially with all the people that you just mentioned that had actually eaten at the restaurant as well.
Mhm.
And I will say too, I'm a big fan of Fig Newtons, but I think they made the right choice. I think a chocolate chip cookie
Thank
trumps a
you,
Fig
thank
Newton.
you. Yeah, and doing my research too, I saw how important it is to have primary sources, and the college and university libraries that do have wonderful things. I got copies of all Ernie Pyle's hand typed columns for the newspaper from the Lilly Library in Indiana University. I got things from Stonehill, from the Martin Institute with all of Stanley Bowman's things. So really important. So I actually archived my papers in Abington at the Dyer Memorial Library. And the director there said I was the first legislator who had ever done that. So interesting.
That's really amazing, and I personally, what my job is to read research all day, and so I'm constantly citing sources. And there's like an old adage in academia that you should cite a source saying the sun rises in the morning. So cite all your sources because you don't want anybody to disagree. I love the idea of campaigning and actually, if it's a negative ad, pointing to the evidence. I wish that was required, honestly. That to me makes perfect sense. And I just liked also that you actually had to struggle with that a bit. I think for most people, it seems like, and I could be wrong, maybe this is just the impression from the outside looking in, it seems like the temptation to go negative is too great and people just do it immediately. So
Yes.
the fact that you actually wrestled with it is really impressive. And then the way that you chose to go about it, I think is the right way to do it. So how'd you decide to do it? Was it just like the only way that would it allow yourself to do a negative ad of any kind?
Yes, because I didn't want to be teaching people that that's the way we should do things. And I was so against it. But people who are in politics for careers, like the campaign managers and things, they know that that works, and it's the money. So to me, we need to get money out of campaigns, and we need to limit the time frame. Other countries do. They have like 3 months. Other democracies have 3 months for campaigning. And we could use public financing, which I was very supportive of. And the Massachusetts voters voted in public financing, but then Speaker Finneran and a lot of the big money corporations fought it before it could get to the next election, because to change the Constitution and put public financing into our Massachusetts Constitution, it had to go in front of the voters 2 times and then in front of the legislature. So they did all kinds of reasons why this was a bad thing. And it would have been like 0.04% of the budget, which this year's budget, I believe, is $46 billion. So that's a very small amount of money that would bring about a great deal of good for all of us.
That's fascinating. I had no idea that it had actually had gained ground here.
Yes.
I mean, it's been a conversation certainly my whole life. So it's at some point, I think they went the opposite direction though. At least at the federal level, they totally
Yes, they did with Citizens United.
Yes.
Incredible, unlimited amounts of money. And that's what happens. It's really a shame.
Yeah, and you can see the way the election cycle works now. I mean, people are already talking about Donald Trump announcing his 2024 election. Instead of conceding, he's going to do that supposedly. So he'll be campaigning for 4 years. I mean, 2 years is already too much.
Yeah,
4 years.
I know, and the money that goes into it, we really need to change that. And from what I saw, I mean, not all men like this, but there were women really worked on coming to consensus, and women want to prevent things from happening. And we also, I was told that I had a lot of background in language that I can't use on this because I would vote against the speakers, because the speakers have so much power in the legislature, and people who are assigned to leadership have to do what the speaker wants them to, as far as voting for different bills and things. So women that I was involved with, would sacrifice their political careers to do the right things. And right now I see more of people who are there and will do anything to get reelected, not to serve the people that they're representing and not to do the good things that we need.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything you just said. I get the same impressions. And I actually read a study. So I did a little bit of research on a number of things around the election coming up. One of the things that I actually found out was that women who work in government, so they studied the federal government, so US senators and representatives tend to be more decisive, first of all. So and the way they study that is basically like, do you actually vote in a similar fashion, and do you maintain your positions on things that you campaigned on? Women tend to be better about that. And then also, working across the aisle. So you can actually show this quantitatively that's true too. So they've done the research and found those same things. So we're a little bit over time. So I just want to be respectful of your time and just also mention a few things in the chat before I keep going. I have so many comments here from people about how appreciative they are of your time in the legislature. Bruce Hughes says you're the only person he's ever held a sign for. Great public servant, BSU alum. Love the president.
Hi, Bruce.
And so there, just so many comments. You have a lot of friends and fans and people who are very appreciative of your time in legislature and also your book and covering the Toll House. A lot of good memories and nostalgia from people around. And just thank you as abound from everybody.
So nice that everybody would listen. Thank them.
And
thank you, Rob.
You as well. And one person asked, what would be the best way to get in touch with you so that they can buy your book? Lots of people want to buy your book. So
okay. My name, Kathy Teahan, Teahan @hotmail.com.
I'm typing that in the chat so everybody can see it.
Yeah, so just Kathy, Kathy, Teahan @hotmail.com.
So yes. This is a great Christmas gift for people, I think.
Yeah, and if you make cookies and give them the book with the cookies, it's an even better gift.
That's perfect. And somebody pointed out that, and so maybe you could actually shed some light on this. So somebody was asking that Nestle at some point technically owned the recipe, and they used to put it on their semi-sweet morsel package. And then however, some years ago, Nestle altered that recipe. And then they asked if your book had the original Toll House recipe in it.
Yes, my book has the original. I have an insert, a card as an insert with the original recipe and a picture of the restaurant. And Ruth sold the name Toll House to them for $1 and a lifetime supply of chocolate, which she didn't make out so well on that because Nestle's went on to do so well. But in my book, it shows a scored bar, which was the first thing Nestle's produced. Then people had to cut that with a knife at home. And those were the first chocolate chips. The recipe on the package uses butter, and her original recipe didn't use butter. It used Crisco.
Crisco, that makes sense. I was going to say, you can't skip butter altogether. You need And so your book is available on Amazon, but I just want to point out to people, you did mention that it would be better if they could reach out to you directly to buy the book. We want to support you as much as we can.
Thanks, Erin. I mail it to people for $15, so that includes postage, handling, and the book, and I can sign it if they want me to sign it too. So
that's beautiful. That's amazing. So if you can reach out directly to Kathy, that's KathyTeahan@hotmail.com to get the book. And is there anything else that you want to say or add at the end here? And just if anybody else has any questions, feel free to submit them and we can get them to Kathy.
Well, I wasn't prompted to say this, but I thank Bridgewater State for opening so many doors for me that have made my life so happy and has given me the abilities to do things that I never dreamed I could do, the same way Ruth Wakefield did things that she never dreamed she would do. And I think that we all can do those things. And we just need to give people a good start with having food, having support, having housing, and having education. So thank you to Bridgewater for that.
And thank you so much. That's a really great way to end. So I want to thank you, Kathy. Thank everybody for joining us. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Alexis for some closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Rob, for facilitating today's question and answers so effortlessly, hosting, as always, our last Aluminar of 2020. And thank you to Kathleen for taking the time to share your story with all of us today. And like you said, you know, we didn't prompt you to talk about Bridgewater, but I know from my interactions with you that Bridgewater is a place that you really love, and we appreciate that. It's been excellent having you here with us today. If anyone has any additional questions or would like to provide any feedback regarding this presentation, as always, we encourage you to email us at alumni@bridgew.edu. Also, if you have any ideas for Aluminars, or if you know any alumni that are out there that have expertise in an area that you think would make a great presenter for one of our Aluminars, please let us know. We have been booking a lot of our presenters for 2021, and we expect to have a great slate. And this will be a program that we keep up well after COVID times. We think that many people are enjoying this series, and we're happy to have you all here today. I would love for you to all please consider attending our next Aluminar, which will be held on January 13th. It's entitled A New Year, A New You, The Importance of Conscious Eating in Maintaining Health. And it's a discussion with Dr. Rhonda Truss, who is also an alum, class of '99. And the registration for that Aluminar will open on the alumni webpage tomorrow. And additional notifications and links regarding January's Aluminar will be sent via email in our monthly newsletter, which will be coming out mid-December and will be posted on social media. So please look out for those. On behalf of the entire Alumni Relations Office, we thank all of you for taking the time to join us today. And we hope that each of you enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Have a happy, safe, and healthy holiday season. And we look forward to seeing you all in the future at our virtual events and in-person events. So have a great end of your year, and we'll see you all in 2021. Thanks again. Have a good day.
Thank you, Kathy. It was great.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, Alexis. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody.